And good morning and welcome. Hi, I'm Jennifer Britton. I am your host of the Effective Virtual Conversations calls. I, of course, am the author of the book by the same name. And this is probably episode of about 30, 32, maybe even 36. I host these calls once a month for Effective Virtual Conversations with the hashtag of Let's Talk Virtual. And today's topic is one that I think is near and dear to most of our hearts. That is of hosting more effective meetings. Factoid is, most managers today are spending 40% or more of their time online, actually not online, but in meetings. Some of that is online where people are literally ping-ponging from meeting to meeting or moving from in-person meeting to others. And I think what we're seeing is just a death by conference call, as I've written about in Effective Virtual Conversations. Today, I wanted to share with you some very practical things that we can be doing to avoid the death by conference call, because we really do want to have more effective, more impactful meetings. I'm going to be going into 5 different tips based on some of the writing that I've done over at the Teams 365 blog. I'm also going to be bringing in some resourcing. So if you have either one of my books, I think the 2 books that this topic today maps to is, of course, Effective Virtual Conversations from 2017, and chapter 9 is all about meetings. Certainly check that out. I'm also going to be going into the bookmark I created. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, click on over to effectivevirtualconversations.com. Find the bookmark link. You can have a copy. And the other book that it's going to link into today for those that are more recent readers is, of course, my 2019 PlanDoTrack. This is a slightly bigger analog workbook planner. You can notice the common ground, and PlanDoTrack is geared for virtual and remote professionals of all kinds. It is part workbook, part planner, and a lot of content. And in fact, a lot of tracking tools for you to be looking at things like how much time are you spending in meetings? What are the things you want to follow up on? So if you're interested in learning more, definitely click on over to PlanDoTrack.com. I do a series of Monday calls around PlanDoTrack as well, and you're more than welcome to join us for those. So really want to get you thinking about those memorable meetings. And I think ultimately we always want to think with the end in mind. That was Stephen Covey's term. I like to say consider the start and the end of things. That's the latency and recency effect. And of course, we want to be thinking about what are those things that are going to capture people's attention. And then before we let them go off on their merry way, how do we help them think about what's next and actioning, more importantly, actioning what they have made commitments around. Now, if you have not joined me before, definitely check out the past calls last month in August 2019. I talked about 3 key skill areas. We looked at design, learning, and call management. Just a reminder that call is available to you. You can go over to the Effective Group Coach YouTube channel, and there you'll find lots of different playlists. Of course, many of you know through my work and thought leadership in the areas of group and team coaching, but the primary type of clients that I work with are in fact virtual and remote teams, as well as solopreneurs growing their businesses. So these are tips for all of you, and really wanted to draw upon a 2016 Teams 365 blog post that I wrote called 5 Tips for More Effective Meetings. So one of the things that I've been doing daily since 2014 has been putting out content around leadership and teamwork into the virtual space through my Teams 365 blog. It's interesting now that Microsoft has that terminology, but I started it back in January of 2014. And really, the blog is geared for remote and in-person leaders and team members. So I wanted to share with you sort of 5 tips that I've been speaking a lot about in the recent years, things that we want to be doing, namely, what is the primary purpose of our call? And is a meeting the best thing? I think many times we meet for meeting's sake. And while it's good to earmark time to keep the conversation going, we do want to make sure that we're very clear and focused on purpose. That will help us determine who needs to be there and what outcomes do we desire. And if you're not starting meetings off already with some discussion around why are we here, what's the end point, what are we looking to achieve, it's probably a missed opportunity. So definitely be thinking about what it is that will help you keep tracking along the way, because we do want to keep to time. it is likely that people only have half an hour to focus in. That's one reason why these calls are very short and crisp. And I'm guessing this fall, they'll probably move from what used to be a 30-minute format, probably more down into about a 20-minute soundbite. Key with meetings is we want to get clear on decisions. Is this a yes? Is this a no? Who's going to run with it? What action steps are you taking? And even before PlanDoTrack came out, this in fact was in Effective Virtual Conversations, I like to really use the one-page plan format. What are the top 5 goals? Who's accountable? What's going to help? What's going to hinder? And if you have a copy of PlanDoTrack, feel free to use that one-page plan. Or if you have Effective Virtual Conversations, you're probably aware that there are downloadable templates. So just click on over in your own copy of the book, page X, okay, page X in the forward, you will see where you can access as a book purchaser the templates and downloads. Another resource, if you're following through in Effective Virtual Conversations, you want to definitely follow along with your major tips each chapter. And as I said, today's chapter is chapter 9. So if you're starting here, that's great. Maybe make sure that you take a few bullet points on what your key tips are around meetings. All right, so these are 5 things we can be doing. My guess is you've got people looking like all different sorts of things, right? And in a team today, we can have people that are really excited to be there, people that just wish they could be at their desk. They have a lot of urgent things. You've got the keeners and the people who are hanging out in the backdrop. As I mentioned at the start of the call, we also have in the virtual space people who are looking like this, where they're not only attending one meeting, but they're hearing the phone in the background, they're doing 2 other projects at the same time. And the to-do list, as you can see to this person's right, is growing and growing and growing. We become simply the blah, 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 blah on the end of the phone. And you'll recognize this drawing from the book. And it is one that I had an excellent cartoonist create in terms of like really bringing to voice, I think, something that we see each and every day in the remote space. So if you haven't visited some of the past calls that I've done on engagement, this is where we want to use strategically things like annotation, getting people's voices on the line through drawing. Maybe using polls to find out how important this topic is or what is important about the topic. That's an even better question. Not how important is this, but what is important about this topic for us to be discussing or for you to be taking away from today's call. We can also be asking ourselves questions to keep them on focus. And I mentioned that there is, or I created, a series of bookmarks years ago in my speaking engagements. If you've had me come in, you've probably seen me distribute these, because on the back are 8 questions we want to be asking before we even have a meeting. So notice that I say not at the start of the meeting, but before we have the meeting. And what has happened here is I've taken the questions that you see here in 304, and some of you might have bought this book a long time ago and said, oh, I haven't had time to crack the spine. That is why I do these calls, to really direct you to some key things you want to highlight in the book. So it's lost here, 8 essential meeting questions, or you can download a copy of the bookmark. We want to be asking ourselves, what's the purpose? What takeaways do we want? Who needs to be on the call? In the virtual space, it's not as easy to go down the hall to capture someone in their office. And if they're not on the line, we might be able to send an email to see if they can drop in, but probably not. So a lot of what we need to do in the virtual space, in the remote space today, is being more proactive. We also want to ask ourselves what preparation is needed for us to be most effective in the meeting. And that might involve some pre-work, some pre-reading, some previewing, or some decision-making and resourcing as well. Also, what pace do we want in order to keep the call, the meeting engaging? We've all been at the ones where the speaker is just not getting to the point, we are not engaged in it, and we tune out. And that's a lost opportunity. So you want to constantly be asking what will help keep the focus. Do we have 2 event organizers, facilitators? I was at a session over the weekend and it involved 2 meeting hosts. Really enjoyed sort of the diversity, the engagement that they brought to keep us on focus. And I have to say, a 3-hour session really went quickly. Number 7 to think about is what is absolutely essential versus the nice to cover. Where can people go for more information? Okay, those are really two different questions, but like, what do we need to do next? What follow-up is required? Who's going to take that? So meetings can really take a lot of time. This is why I designed a workbook for PlanDoTrack, right? So we want to be tracking how much time are we even spending in meetings. And if you join me for any of the PlanDoTrack calls, you'll know that this workbook planner includes 28 different planning tools. There are annual planning tools, quarterly planning tools, and a lot of monthly tools. And one of the things I've included here are a number of time trackers. So under each monthly section, you will see something called the monthly daily tracker. And what you can see right now is just an empty grid, but maybe one of the things I want to be tracking for a month is meeting time. You can go across at the end of every day, actually indicate how much meeting time are you spending. And also, how much time are you spending on follow-up? If this is your Achilles heel, this might be a great resource and activity to get involved with. And of course, you can pick up a copy. Just Google my name, Jennifer Britton, over on Amazon, and PlanDoTrack, P-L-A-N, do track, will come up. It definitely is worth the less than $30 for the cost of the book. Now, we can really be having a number of challenges or things that happen as we go into meetings. And whether it happens every meeting of the day or just one of it can really derail things. So some things to think about as you're facilitating the meeting: not having an agenda and sticking to it. Not starting and ending meetings on time. It's like the domino effect. The meetings just go forward, forward, forward. We also want to be very clear on process, and anyone who joins me for a call will know that I want to use a meeting to have dialogue, right? As I write in Effective Virtual Conversations, dialogue is about dual conversation. It's about having dialogue with two people. We want to make sure that we are calling on people that we haven't heard from, and to let people know to expect that. That can keep the call moving. Once again, it's different voices, different ideas, different perspectives. And if we are part of a virtual and remote team, it is critical that we hear from everyone, not just the leader. Now, for those that are part of a virtual or remote team, think about the impact of not rotating meeting times. Having worked globally for the bulk of the first 15 years of my career, I knew how important it was that we weren't just always meeting at the same time, because inevitably that one person might find it very inconvenient. So definitely think about that, and also be very clear on what has been agreed to and who is accountable. Again, I've already flagged the notion of having a one-page plan or other. If you review chapter 9 in Effective Virtual Conversations, back to EVC, you'll notice that there are a number of other types of topics here. There's the one-page plan, so I showed you a bigger version of it. There's also a template for a virtual call check-in, and we also have some ideas for post-meeting follow-up. So in Effective Virtual Conversations, we follow the journeys of Jane and also Joe. I should have included my photograph here of check-in with Jane. Maybe what I'll just do is a quick reading here. Check-in with Jane around virtual meetings. As I write on page 323 of Effective Virtual Conversations, Jane is getting ready for a high-stakes virtual meeting and makes sure she has covered all the bases with her pre-meeting checklist. She takes note of, number 1, her pre-engagement with meeting participants. The agenda went out more than 10 days ago, and feedback received on additional items and participants was incorporated. Check, check. We want to make sure people's voices are in there. The second thing that Jane is checking on is the 8 essential meeting questions. Can you remember what was on the bookmark? Who needs to be there? What follow-up is there? And Jane is referring to that bookmark and seeing how she's going to incorporate them. The third thing Jane looks at is her setup for breakouts and the virtual whiteboards in the meeting, including a parking lot. With virtual technologies today, we may be leveraging, this is a sidebar, don't go into it, but we may be leveraging lots of different whiteboards and things that will visually anchor it. The nice thing about virtual meetings, like hosting a call on Zoom, is we can stop, we can pause, we can send it off for transcription rather than having to take 2 or 3 weeks to get the meeting notes out and agreed to. So think about your policies and procedures. Have you created a new policy and procedure about recording these calls, having this be legal record? And that, again, is a bigger conversation than here. It is something you and your organization will need to look at. So back to Jane's checklist in the book, page 323, number 4. Jane is also looking at the 5 faux pas, as we see here, to avoid in virtual meetings. She's thinking about how she's going to make sure she's, calling on everyone, starting and ending on time. She also thinks about number 5, the rules which need to be filled at the start of the meeting. And that's something I didn't touch on today, but really, what is the rule? Are you having someone keep you on time? Is someone taking notes? Is someone keeping the show moving, dealing with technical issues, etc.? And then finally, Jane is also thinking about is she going to address the start of the call, the midpoint, and the end. And with Jane, we know that she is very conscientious. She's very visual. She is always like thinking through how to get things moving. It's a high stakes virtual meeting, and like any meeting, you have one chance to make sure it works. So I hope that today's call has gotten you thinking about things, really to look at 7 keys for effective meetings. And this is in person and also especially in a virtual space. I would invite you to check out the article and blog post by the same name by me, 7 keys for effective meetings. Number 1, engagement. How do we engage people? 2, how do we connect them? 3, how do we build trust? How do we ensure that there's good design? So I've suggested some things like starting and ending on time, having something that captures people's attention, maybe hearing from everyone at the end of the call, and keeping it moving. Very important that we keep things moving and that we make it as visual as possible. We want to leverage technology, and number 1 and number 5, we want to use things like breakouts when we want input. We want to make sure that we're using annotation so people can check things off. We want to keep it really, really visual. And I think key to this is also being nimble, and being nimble is also about knowing when you need to move things forward and maybe where you need to pull things back. And that should be agreed upon with meeting attendees. One thing that I've been doing more of, and I think this is a great slide, I pulled this from one of our recent calls, is to really remember things like consider visuals for impact. A few minutes ago, I shared the 5 meeting faux pas. It looked like this in this slide deck. Imagine if I'd given you a slide that looked like this. And in fact, a few months ago, I was involved in doing some rebranding of our leadership lab programming. And you'll notice certainly a lot more graphics, a lot more iconography, certainly in looking at how we can use Word, PowerPoint. A lot of people I've heard recently say, I had gravitated away from using PowerPoint, but it is a conversation enabler. And I think we want to be very aware of who are we working with. If we are working with younger generations, they are digital natives. They are used to seeing things. They are used to a very vibrant video-based input. And so I think that means if we do want to capture attention, visuals, graphics, all of these are an area perhaps that you want to learn more about. So how do you go from your bland to something that is a little bit more wow? And again, for every organization, it's going to look a little different. I'd simply say, what else? What else is important for you to consider as you go to wow up your meetings? I've covered quite a few things, and just to recap, what have we looked at again today? We have looked at, think about it, top 3 things. I'm going to say my top 3 things are the bookmark. We've also looked at how do we keep conversations rolling? How do we avoid the 5 virtual faux pas? And to what I shared with Jane, how do we make sure that we are using impact, start, middle, and end, and other arenas? This is one of many calls that I host throughout the month. I will continue to offer monthly EVC calls, as I like to hold it. The hashtag, of course, is Let's Talk Virtual. Mapping into this program, of course, is the Virtual Facilitation Essentials, where you get to practice and learn about leading more engaging calls. The next session, our fall session of this program, will start next week, Monday, Monday, September 16th. It's going to be a Monday afternoon program from 1:30 to 2:45 for 5 weeks, the 16th, 23rd, 30th of September, October 7th, and 21st. No call on October 14th. If you want to become more proficient and aware of what is possible in the virtual space, this is a great program for you. You will have micro opportunity to actually lead an opener or a closer of a call just to get that experience. It's one thing to talk about it and learn about it. It's another thing to do it. And even though we don't have a lot of time in the Essentials program, there is an opportunity, so do take that on. For those of you that are coaches, the program is reviewed and approved for 8.5 CCEs with the International Coach Federation, and that is coming up. Also, some others coming up, PlanDoTrack facilitator training. So I talked a little bit about facilitator training earlier. This resource is geared for virtual remote employees, remote workers, entrepreneurs. If you are working with those types of professionals, I hope that you might consider becoming a PlanDoTrack facilitator, bringing this resource in as one of your many tools under your business umbrella. I offer a 6-session, 18 hours, 24 CCE program, virtual training, so that you are up to speed and know what the training is all about. It's going to start on October the 8th and run for 6 weeks. It will be a Tuesday program from 12:30 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Think about joining us. That program is now 24 CCEs, including 19 core competencies. And we are going to keep these calls moving. Next EVC Book Club call, October 7th. Supports for virtual facilitation and keeping the conversation going. Call time is shorter, 20 minutes, which I said we do today, but it is about keeping it going. So are we using Slack? Are we using different things? How are we keeping the focus and keeping the convo moving? With that, I want to say a big thank you for joining us today. You'll find this along with our other calls under the Effective Virtual Conversations or Effective Virtual Conversations playlist over at my Effective Group Coach YouTube channel. And I'm Jennifer Britton. If you have any questions or would like to set up a quick call to hear how we might be able to support you better through individual coaching, group coaching, or a variety of team supports or facilitation for your virtual events, definitely reach out and contact me, info@potentialsrealized.com. And thanks again for joining me. Hope that you'll join us next month on Supports for Virtual Facilitation, keeping the conversation going. Take care, everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.